This dog saved a lost child in the woods. What it did next shocked the rescue team. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dense forest near Pinehaven, a small, secluded town nestled at the edge of sprawling woodlands. The air carried a crisp chill, a reminder that autumn was giving way to winter. Locals often referred to the woods as the whispering forest, due to the way the wind seemed to sing through the trees. It was a place of quiet beauty and hidden dangers. Before we continue with the video and dive deeper into the incredible story, I want to ask for your help. I'm aiming to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and your support would mean the world to me. If you've been enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments down below. 8-year-old Lily Cartwright was missing. Her parents had reported her absence after she didn't return from playing in the backyard. The search party quickly mobilized with volunteers, local law enforcement, and even a team of trained search and rescue dogs combing the forest. Among the chaos, a dog named Shadow, a large, sleek, black German Shepherd mix with intelligent amber eyes and a streak of silver fur along his right ear, stood at the ready. Shadow wasn't officially part of the rescue team but belonged to Aaron Tate, a local animal rescuer who had trained him to assist in emergencies. Shadow had a reputation in Pinehaven for his uncanny ability to find lost hikers and even injured wildlife. Erin had barely returned home when she received the frantic call about Lily. Shadow, sensing the urgency, barked sharply and dashed to the door before Erin even grabbed her coat. "All right, boy," Erin said, patting his head. "Let's do what we do best." The whispering forest was vast, its trails winding and often leading to dead ends. By the time Erin and Shadow arrived at the search site, dusk was quickly fading into darkness. Volunteers with flashlights called out Lily's name, their voices bouncing off the trees. "She couldn't have gone far," said Deputy Mark Lanson, his brow furrowed with worry. "We just need to keep moving before the temperature drops any lower." Shadow sniffed the pink jacket Lily's mother had given Erin, his ears perking up as he caught the scent. Erin nodded, giving him the command, "Find her, Shadow." With a sharp bark, Shadow took off, his sleek form disappearing into the darkness. Erin followed close behind, her heart pounding as she kept her flashlight trained on Shadow's bobbing figure. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves underfoot. Minutes turned into an hour. Erin and Shadow ventured deeper into the woods, farther than anyone else had searched. The air grew colder, and the trees seemed to press in around them. Shadow suddenly stopped, his body tense. He let out a low, guttural growl. "What is it?" Erin whispered, shining her flashlight ahead. There, in the beam of light, was Lily. She was huddled at the base of a large oak tree, her small frame wrapped in a thin sweater. Her cheeks were tear-streaked, and her lips trembled with cold. "Lily!" Erin called, rushing forward. Shadow stayed close, his keen eyes scanning the area. Lily looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "I was scared," she whispered as Erin wrapped her in a warm blanket. "There was something watching me." Erin's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, sweetie?" But before Lily could answer, Shadow's growl deepened. The fur along his back bristled, and he positioned himself protectively between the two humans and the darkness beyond. Erin's flashlight flickered as she swung it round, trying to see what had spooked him. The forest seemed empty, but Shadow's stance said otherwise. "Let's get out of here," Erin said, hoisting Lily onto her back. "Good boy, Shadow. Lead the way." As they retraced their steps, Shadow stayed alert, his ears swiveling at every sound. Erin couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The forest was too quiet, the usual chirps and rustles absent. Lily clung tightly to Erin, her small voice barely audible. "It's still there," she murmured. "What's still there?" Erin asked, her heart hammering. "The eyes," Lily replied. "They were watching me." Shadow barked sharply, snapping Erin out of her thoughts. Up ahead, the search party's lights flickered through the trees, and relief flooded Erin's chest. "We're almost there," she reassured Lily. As they emerged from the woods, the crowd of volunteers erupted in cheers. Lily's parents rushed forward, tears streaming down their faces as they embraced their daughter. Shadow wagged his tail as Lily reached down to pet him. "He saved me," she said with a weak smile. But Erin couldn't shake the lingering tension. Shadow's body was still stiff, his gaze fixed on the tree line. Something was out there, something that wasn't ready to let them go. The joyful reunion at the forest's edge was a brief reprieve for Erin. As she watched Lily being cradled by her parents, she couldn't help but notice Shadow's continued unease. His amber eyes remained fixed on the whispering forest, his body tense and his ears flicking at the faintest sound. Deputy Mark Lanson approached, his expression a mix of relief and curiosity. "You did good, Erin, and Shadow too," he said, scratching the dog behind the ears. Shadow barely acknowledged the praise, letting out a low whine as he glanced back at the woods. Erin crossed her arms, her breath visible in the chilly air. "Something doesn't feel right, Mark. Shadow's been on edge since we found Lily. She said something was watching her." Mark frowned, glancing at the dense line of trees. "A bear, maybe, or coyotes. Could have spooked her." "Maybe," Erin replied, though her gut told her otherwise. Shadow had faced bears and coyotes before, and his reaction was never like this. It was something else, something unknown. As the search team packed up and Lily's family headed home, Erin lingered by the forest's edge. Shadow stood beside her, his posture rigid. The others had dismissed the night's events as a simple rescue. But Erin couldn't shake the feeling that they'd narrowly escaped something sinister. She knelt beside Shadow, running a hand along his sleek fur. "What is it, boy? What did you see out there?" Shadow let out a soft whine, nuzzling Erin's hand. His eyes, intelligent and alert, seemed to convey something she couldn't understand. Erin sighed, standing up. "All right, let's head home." The next morning, Erin woke to the sound of Shadow barking, sharp, frantic barks that echoed through her small farmhouse. She jumped out of bed, grabbing her coat and rushing outside. Shadow was by the front porch, pacing and barking toward the forest in the distance. "Shadow, what's going on?" Erin called, but the dog didn't stop. His gaze was fixed on the tree line, and his tail was stiff. Erin followed his line of sight. In the pale morning light, she saw faint footprints in the snow leading from the woods to the edge of her property. They were small, human-like, but uneven, as though whoever made them had been limping. Her chest tightened as she crouched to inspect them. The tracks ended abruptly, as if the person had vanished into thin air. Shadow growled low in his throat, and Erin instinctively stood up, scanning the area. The woods were silent again, the stillness unnerving. She rubbed her arms against the cold, her mind racing. Was Lily right? Had something or someone been watching her? Unable to shake her unease, Erin decided to visit Lily's family later that day. Shadow sat in the passenger seat of her truck, his head swiveling to watch the forest as they drove. When they arrived, Lily's mother, Karen, greeted them at the door. "Erin, come in," Karen said, her face lighting up. "We owe you and Shadow so much." Erin smiled warmly, but quickly got to the point. "How's Lily doing?" Karen nodded, glancing toward the living room where Lily sat curled up with a blanket and a mug of hot cocoa. "She's shaken, but okay. She hasn't stopped talking about Shadow. She says he's her hero." Erin chuckled, patting Shadow's head. "He's a good boy, but Karen, Lily mentioned something strange last night. She said there were eyes watching her." Karen's smile faltered. "Yes, she mentioned that to me too. I just assumed it was her imagination. She was scared and alone out there." Erin hesitated, debating whether to press further. "Did she say what kind of eyes, or anything else about what she saw?" Karen looked troubled. "Not really. Just that they were big and glowing. She said she felt like they were following her." A chill ran down Erin's spine. Shadow let out a low growl, his ears perking up as he stared out the window. Erin followed his gaze, her pulse quickening. The forest loomed in the distance, its dark silhouette stark against the afternoon sky. "I think I'm going to take another look," Erin said, standing abruptly. "Something doesn't add up." Later that afternoon, Erin and Shadow returned to the whispering forest. The snow crunched beneath their boots and paws as they retraced their steps from the previous night. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. Shadow moved with purpose, his nose to the ground and his tail straight. Erin followed closely, scanning the woods for any signs of movement. As they neared the large oak tree where they'd found Lily, Shadow stopped suddenly. He stood still, his ears forward and his body rigid. "What is it, boy?" Erin whispered, reaching for the flashlight in her bag. Shadow let out a deep, warning growl. Erin swung the flashlight around, the beam cutting through the dim light. At first, she saw nothing, just trees and snow. But then her light landed on something that made her breath catch. A figure stood partially obscured by the trees. It was tall and gaunt, its skin pale and almost translucent, its eyes, large and glowing faintly, locked onto hers, and Erin felt a jolt of fear. The figure moved slightly, its movements jerky and unnatural, before disappearing into the shadows. Erin's heart raced as she grabbed Shadow's collar. "Let's go," she whispered, backing away. Shadow stayed close, his growls low and menacing. They hurried back to the truck, Erin's mind racing. What had she just seen? Was it human? Animal? Something else entirely? And why had it been watching them? That night, Erin sat by the fireplace with Shadow curled at her feet. She couldn't shake the image of the figure in the woods. Every time she closed her eyes, those glowing eyes stared back at her. She knew one thing for certain. Whatever was in the whispering forest wasn't just watching. It was waiting. The following day, Erin woke to the sound of Shadow barking again. This time, The sound was even more frantic, echoing through the frosty morning air. She rushed outside, half-dressed, to find Shadow pacing near the tree line of her property. His fur bristled, his body tense, as he let out low, guttural growls. The tracks in the snow were back, only this time they were accompanied by larger, clawed prints. The two sets of tracks led toward the forest, but didn't return. Erin's stomach churned as she crouched to examine them. Shadow sniffed the ground and barked once, sharply, before looking at her, his amber eyes filled with urgency. "All right, Shadow," Erin muttered, grabbing her jacket. "We're not running from this anymore. We're going to figure out what's out there." With a heavy flashlight, a hunting knife, and Shadow at her side, Erin plunged back into the whispering forest. The air felt heavier than usual, the silence almost oppressive. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the overcast sky, muffling their steps as they moved deeper into the woods. Shadow led the way, his nose to the ground and his movements deliberate. His tail was low, his ears swiveling to catch the faintest sounds. Erin followed closely, her grip tight on the flashlight. As they neared the large oak tree where they had found Lily, Shadow froze. He crouched low, growling deeply, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. Erin swung her flashlight around, the beam cutting through the dim light. The snow-covered ground glinted faintly, but there was no sign of movement. Then she saw it. Half buried beneath the snow was something metallic, catching the light of her flashlight. Erin approached cautiously, her heart pounding. It was a small rusted box, its hinges corroded and its surface etched with strange symbols. She knelt to pick it up, brushing off the snow, while Shadow circled her protectively. The box was cold to the touch, unnaturally so. Erin tried to open it, but the lid wouldn't budge. As she examined it, a low, eerie howl echoed through the forest. The sound wasn't like anything she'd heard before. Deep, mournful, and resonating with an unnatural tone. Shadow stiffened, barking furiously in the direction of the sound. Erin's grip on the box tightened as she stood, scanning the woods with her flashlight. A shape moved between the trees, tall and gaunt, just like the figure she had seen the day before. But this time, there were two of them. Their glowing eyes shone faintly through the shadows, fixed on Erin and Shadow. They didn't move closer, but their presence was enough to send a chill down Erin's spine. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady, despite the fear building inside her. The figures remained silent, their eyes unblinking. Shadow barked again, stepping forward protectively. Erin placed a hand on his back to steady him, whispering, "Easy, boy." As she backed away slowly, one of the figures moved. Its jerky, unnatural gait brought it closer to the tree. It reached out a long, bony arm, its fingers pointing directly at the rusted box in Erin's hands. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. The box wasn't just a relic. It was connected to whatever these creatures were. Maybe it was a key, or perhaps a warning. Erin's mind raced as she tried to piece together the puzzle. With trembling hands, she held up the box. "Is this what you want?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. The creatures didn't respond, but the one nearest to her tilted its head, as if studying her. Then, without warning, it let out a piercing, otherworldly shriek. The sound sent Shadow into a frenzy, barking and growling as he stepped in front of Erin. "Okay, we're done here," Erin muttered. clutching the box as she turned and ran. Shadow stayed close, his barks echoing through the trees as they fled. Back at her farmhouse, Erin locked the doors and windows, her chest heaving as she leaned against the kitchen counter. Shadow paced the room, still growling softly, his eyes darting toward the door. She placed the rusted box on the table and stared at it, her mind racing. What was its purpose? And why had the creatures let her leave with it? She needed answers, fast. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Erin froze, her heart skipping a beat. Shadow barked once, sharply, positioning himself between her and the door. "Who is it?" Erin called, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "It's Deputy Lanson," came the familiar voice. "Open up, Erin." Relieved, Erin unlocked the door. Deputy Lanson stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. His expression was grave. "I heard Shadow barking from down the road. Figured I'd check in. What's going on?" Erin gestured toward the box on the table. "I found this in the woods, and I saw those things again." Lanson's brows furrowed as he approached the table. "Things?" Erin described the figures, their glowing eyes, and the strange howl that had followed her. Lanson listened intently, his expression growing more serious with every word. "I've heard stories about the Whispering Forest," he said finally. "Old legends about spirits or guardians that protect something buried there. People used to say the forest was alive, that it didn't like outsiders poking around." Erin frowned. "Do you think they're connected to this box?" "Maybe," Lanson replied, examining the rusted artifact. "Whatever it is, it's not normal. You might want to get someone who knows more about this kind of thing." The following day, Erin contacted Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a historian and archaeologist who had recently moved to Cedar Ridge. When Dr. Marsh arrived, her eyes lit up at the sight of the box. "This is incredible," Dr. Marsh said, running her fingers over the etched symbols. "These markings are ancient, possibly pre-colonial. They resemble protective runes, meant to ward off intruders or guard something valuable." "Guard what?" Erin asked, her pulse quickening. Dr. Marsh shrugged. "Could be anything, a treasure, a sacred artifact, or even something dangerous. Whatever it is, it's clear that the forest's guardians don't want it disturbed." Erin felt a chill run down her spine. "What do we do?" Dr. Marsh studied the box for a moment before replying, "We take it back. If this belongs to the forest, it's safest to leave it there." That evening, Erin, Shadow, and Dr. Marsh ventured back into the Whispering Forest. The box felt heavier in Erin's hands as they approached the large oak tree. The forest was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Shadow growled softly as they reached the tree, his body tense. Erin knelt at the base of the tree and placed the box in a hollow beneath its roots. As soon as the box was in place, a low, mournful howl echoed through the woods. The figures appeared once more, their glowing eyes fixed on Erin. But this time, they didn't move closer. Instead, they bowed their heads briefly before retreating into the shadows. The forest seemed to exhale, its oppressive weight lifting. Shadow relaxed, his growls subsiding as he nuzzled Erin's hand. "It's done," Dr. Marsh said softly. "Whatever was in that box, it belongs here." Erin nodded, her heart heavy but relieved. As they made their way back to the farmhouse, she couldn't help but feel a deep respect for the forest and its guardians. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would stay with them forever. And as Shadow trotted beside her, his tail wagging, Erin knew she had nothing to fear. With her loyal companion by her side,